It's time for my favorite Pokemon Pocket video of the week. I've combed through thousands of deck lists so you don't have to and found some of the most interesting things that posted solid results in our community tournaments this week. Let's go ahead and dive on into some sweet and potentially powerful deck lists. If you're someone who's looking to be disruptive, this Genetic Apex Gengar plus Stoutland 1-2 punch might just be the deck list for you. Finishing 4-2 in the community tournament that it was played, both of these stage 2 Pokemon are going to make your opponent pause and reconsider how they're going to be executing their strategy when your effects get online against them. Gengar locking your opponent out of supporters has always been a pretty potent effect, but with Silvally's recent addition to the metagame, it's now become a counter card very directly to one of the decks looking to ramp up its damage on their lead attacker. Thanks to Rare Candy, if you have first evolution advantage, you can start locking your opponent out of supporters starting as early as the second turn, meaning your opponent will absolutely never have a chance to get their Silvally to crack for 100 points of damage. When Gengar's nowhere to be found, Stoutland does a solid secondary job of, once you evolve into it, it's going to slow your opponent's attacks down while also hitting for a really solid 70 damage for 2 energy. You get to top everything off with the fact that this deck list is playing not just one, but 2 different stage 2 Pokemon that have 130 plus HP, while all being non-EXs, meaning when we combine this with Lily as well as Giant Cape for maximum amount of sustain, the opponent also has to crunch through an incredible amount of HP in addition to dealing with our very disruptive elements. Stoutland wasn't the only Genetic Apex Gengar build to find success, with this build finishing 5-3 in the Swiss rounds of the Ursi Day tournament. I think the deck building here is really solid theory. You have Gengar as your ideal primary lead to get some disruptive points on the board to start, while also having high HP on the back of Rare Candy. You have Sigilith to help you assemble it more consistently, and you have a copy of Oricorio to hit for a solid burst of damage once they finally knock out your Gengar. The single copy of Mewtwo EX I think makes a lot of sense as well, since all of the attackers in this deck list use a pretty minimal amount of energy, meaning while your Gengar is up front wreaking havoc on your opponent's supporters, you can go ahead and be charging up a side drive as a potential finisher once your opponent claims their first 2 points. The only thing that comes to mind for me when looking at this deck list is perhaps we want a copy of Tapu Lele in here still somewhere, as Darkrai Giratina, while not the most popular deck in the metagame anymore, still has a relatively reasonable presence in the metagame, and things like Buzzwole and Guzzlord that are running around put a solid amount of energies on themselves as well. Next up, we have a Lycanroc EX spotting, with this particular deck list going 5-2 in the Swiss rounds of the Ursi Day tournament. Lycanroc EX at face value feels like it has all the right numbers in all the right places. It has 150 HP and it cracks for 130 points of damage, with the caveat that it's going to require your energy investment every single turn. I like the angle that this particular deck list has taken with this card, where you're leading with efficient 1-point attackers like Hitmonlee and Farfetch'd, meaning when you finally get your Lycanroc EX up to the front of the class, it's going to be the thing that's going to be closing the game out for you, meaning it doesn't matter that it's taking your energy investment every single turn. I also like the inclusion of one Baby Lycanroc in this deck, so that way in the games where you lead on Rockruff and you don't have an X speed or simply don't want to move it out of the active spot, you have a 1-point evolution you can evolve it into, so you can go 1-1-1 or 1-1 finish on Lycanroc EX with your other Rockruff as well. This deck list core templating reminds me of the Fighting Box decks of old that had success in a lot of our previous Pokemon Pocket metagames. Another version of Lycanroc EX that went 5-3 in the Pocket Legends tournament this weekend was playing Passimian as its other attacker, as well as the Rockruff that fishes up evolutions from its deck. It's noteworthy that this Rockruff is explicitly templated in a way where it's not finding specific cards, i.e. Baby Lycanroc, it's finding any card that it evolves into, meaning it can fish up the singleton copy of Lycanroc EX that this deck has. The low total Pokemon count here means that Pokemon communication becomes incredibly accurate, meaning that after you Rockruff up your Lycanroc EX, you can usually readily turn it into a Passimian, where you can X speed out to that and start cracking for 60 to give you some initial pressure, and then once that goes down, you can move those energies over to the Lycanroc with Passimian's offload pass Pokemon ability to keep the pressure on. I think leaning into a little bit of extra sustain with Pokemon Center Lady and Cape in this deck makes a lot of sense, so that way your Lycanroc's 150 HP can survive a little bit longer, so it can crack for 130 damage more frequently over the course of the game. If you're a premium pass enjoyer in Pokemon Pocket and you're looking for a place to leverage your new full art Zeraora, this Tapu Koko deck might just be the one for you. I like the idea that this deck list can either have really aggressive starts with Tapu Koko followed up by Tapu Koko, cracking for 90 points of damage really quickly on the back of the Plasma Hurricane, but you could also go a 1-1-2 route with Zera into Zera or Zera into Oricorio, depending on if your opponent's playing a bunch of EX Pokemon, and then eventually finish on Tapu Koko behind it all. One interesting thing to point out about this particular deck list is it's choosing not to play any copies of the new tool Electrical Cord, instead choosing to play Rocky Helmets as a more aggressive Pokemon tool attachment, while also leaning into some extra sustain in its other slots with a whopping two copies of Pokemon Center Lady, as well as a Healing Shaman, likely to keep Oricorio going in the matchups against things like Darkrai Giratina that try to chip shot down this annoying yellow bird. This Silvally Greninja deck went 6-2 in the Swiss rounds of the Ursa Day tournament this past weekend, and it definitely makes Silvally one of the cards that is the most figuring out left to do in this metagame, while the Rampardos variation was the easy, obvious one that's been the most popular so far. Silvally being colorless means there's so many different combinations to explore, and I like the idea of playing it as a lead 1-point threat in this Greninja style deck. You gotta have that I have a bunch of one knockout pointers that all have 100 and plus HP with solid attacks, and your Silvally getting to crack up to 120 points in a single turn with Greninja and a supporter backing it up is a pretty appealing breakpoint. One potential downside that we see in this particular deck list is that fitting Silvally with Gladion inside of a deck playing a stage 2 is not free, though, as they didn't have room to play two copies of the key supporter that makes Silvally more consistent. I'll be curious to see exactly what shape these decks take as the metagame continues to develop. The addition of Nihilego to the game has all of us reassessing all of our previous cards that apply poison to our opponent's Pokemon, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's enjoyed dusting off my awesome full art genetic Apex Weezings to see if they could be up to snuff in our latest meta. This particular deck list went 5-3 in the Swiss rounds of the Pocket Legends tournament, and I like the inclusion of Clodsire EX as one of its finishers, with Nihilego making your poison deal 20 damage per cycle. It means Clodsire's 2 energy attack effectively cracks for 140 points of damage on a poisoned enemy in a single burst, which is just an absolutely massive amount for this energy investment. You pair this with the fact that this archetype also picked up Poison Barb in our previous expansion, and maybe Clodsire could finally be a force to be reckoned with. I also like the fact that this deck list isn't all in on a single game plan. You have the Weezing and Nihilego that can give you this 1.1 point start, and then you can either finish on Clodsire or a Darkrai EX, giving you a lot of flexibility in what exactly you're doing. Another Nihilego variation cut through the Swiss of our community tournament like a hot knife through butter, racking up a 6-0 record, featuring Naganadel as its primary lead attacker and Darkrai as its finisher. This deck list threatens to get a massive amount of damage every single turn, going very quickly, with Naganadel cracking for 40, applying poison, which Nihilego makes deals 20 on a cycle, and then you add in chip shots from your Darkrai in the back, and you have a 1 energy 1 point lead attacker that's effectively hitting for 80 damage every single turn, with additional 20 threatening if they don't retreat from the poison that's cracking them for 20 every single pass. One call out here that I might consider is getting up to a second copy of Leaf, as this deck desperately wants to start on Naganadel, meaning anytime Darkrai is going to be in your active spot at the start of the game, you're going to want to be able to move it out ASAP. Finally, I always like to wrap up these new deck roundups with an off-meta build that doesn't require new cards for folks that are still opening through this expansion, and this Togekiss Tapu Lele deck from last season caught my eye in one of our recent community tournaments with its 4-2 finish. I think the core theory of this deck is really solid, and we saw some variations of it put up success in our previous meta game as well. Togekiss hits hard and fast while having a solid HP pool, and Tapu Lele is really efficient into the bigger energy attackers that are still pretty present in our metagame, like Buzzwole and Guzzlord, and obviously still Giratina and Darkrai. If you found a sweet new deck list or two to play in today's video, I'd encourage you to smash that like button to help it reach some more people. If you happen to be new here and you enjoy exploring off-meta deck lists, you want to make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the highlights that'll be coming up of the things in this video and others that we're working on, as well as our future meta reports and new decks roundups in the coming week as the Extra Dimensional Crisis metagame continues to develop. Personally, I'm looking forward to checking out Gengar and some Weezing variations on my live stream this week. As always, I appreciate everybody made it through the end of the video, and I hope your next pack is an excellent one.
The decks in this video may be worse than their statistically insignificant sample sizes make them appear. There is no easy button for getting to Masters in Pokemon Pocket, and if you are looking for that in this YouTube video or any other, you will likely be sorely disappointed.